Now imagine an entire sea, its flow being cut by artificial channels, dug-out canals, giant pumps and gates redirecting entire rivers to irrigate crops hundreds of kilometers away. Little by little, the water simply stopped coming. That's how the Aral Sea, which was once the fourth largest lake on the planet, collapsed. An environmental disaster so massive that it became a global reference for how infrastructure can profoundly alter an entire ecosystem. But in the north of this former sea, something unexpected happened. Instead of trying to recover everything, the project decided to stabilize only part of it. In 2005, the Kokaral Dam was completed, a barrier about 13 kilometers long that separates the North Aral, known as the Small Aral, from the South Aral. Stay with us for the next few minutes to understand how the entire sea collapsed and how the barrier failed. The relatively small one managed to change the fate of an entire region. The Kokaral Dam is located in Kazakhstan, near the city of Aral Sea, in the natural narrowing that today divides what remains of the former Aral Sea. There, the dike cuts through the geographic bottleneck and separates two completely different environments. On one side is the North Aral, fed by the Sir River and still able to sustain a functional water system. On the other side, the South Aral, which is shallower, extremely saline, and severely affected by the reduction in water inflow. To understand the scale of the problem, it's worth remembering that the Aral Sea was not just a regional lake, it was a true inland sea, shared between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, sustained by two major rivers of Central Asia, the Sir and the Amu Darya. When these flows began to be diverted by large agricultural irrigation systems throughout the 20th century, the natural balance of the lake was profoundly altered. It is in this context that the Kokaral appears as an almost surgical engineering solution. Instead of trying to recover the entire Aral, the project decides to stabilize only the part that still has enough water supply to survive. But this raises an essential question. If engineering helped cause the collapse of the Aral Sea, could another engineering project help recover part of it? To understand the Kokaral Dam, first it's necessary to look at the engineering that caused the collapse of the Aral Sea. Starting from the second half of the 20th century, the Soviet Union implemented a large-scale irrigation program in Central Asia. The goal was to transform arid regions into major agricultural centers, especially focused on cotton production. The system depended directly on water from two major rivers, which fed the Aral, the Amu Darya, and the Sir Darya. The strategy brought important economic results, but the hydrological impact appeared in the following decades, with less water reaching the Aral Sea and naturally high evaporation rates in the region. The balance of the system was broken. The lake level began to drop rapidly, and the salinity increased. Fishing ports became increasingly distant from the new shoreline, and cities that depended on fishing began to live with abandoned boats. In 1990, the first local attempts to contain the problem emerged. Residents built small improvised dikes to try to retain the water in the northern part of the lake, but these structures were fragile and ended up being destroyed by the natural fluctuations in water level. The change in approach came when Kazakhstan, with support from the World Bank, structured the Sir Control and Northern Aral Sea Project, known as Sir Control and Northern Aral Sea. The program combined improvements in water control of the Sir River with the construction of a permanent barrier separating the Northern Aral from the Southern Aral. This barrier became known as the Kokaral Dam, completed in 2005. However, turning this idea into reality required more than simply building a dike. It was necessary to create a structure capable of controlling the river's flow and stabilizing the entire regional water system. But how this project was built is what we will see now. The completion of the Kokaral Dam in 2005 marked the exact point when the recovery of the North Aral Sea ceased to be a hypothesis and began to operate as a real water system. The dike, about 13 kilometers long, was built at the natural narrowing that connects the North Aral to the South Aral, precisely at the point where it would be possible to separate the two bodies of water with a relatively short structure. Considering the scale of the former basin, the choice of the route was decisive. A shorter length meant a reduction in the volume of landfill, lower implementation costs, and greater efficiency in flow control. From a construction standpoint, the Kokaral was built as an embankment dike, that is, a compacted earth dam designed to retain water in a former lake basin. This type of structure may look simple from a distance, but it depends on delicate engineering decisions. The subgrade of the receded sea tends to be composed of fine sediments and compressible materials, which requires geotechnical assessment, stability control, and solutions to limit seepage and settlement. In projects like the Kokaral Dam, it's not enough to just block the water passage. It's necessary to ensure that the dike body remains stable, with the gradual rise of the lake level and increasing water compression over the years. The execution logic was that of an integrated containment structure. The World Bank makes it clear that the Cernus project is not just about a dike. It combined the construction of the Kokaral with improvements to the hydraulic structures along the lower Sirdarya, including control and regulation interventions. In the delta, to increase the river's carrying capacity, reduce losses, and ensure that water reached the northern Aral more efficiently. In other words, the dam holds the dam water, but the one that feeds this new reservoir is the regulated river. Without this second component, the dike alone would have a much smaller effect. This is the main educational point of the construction. The Kokaral was not designed as an isolated wall in the middle of a dry lake. It was designed as a hydraulic key. Before the construction, the water from the Karidaria would spread over a huge shallow area, evaporating on a large scale before generating effective recovery. After the dam, the water started to be retained, first in the North Aral. According to the World Bank, the first phase of Sinas raised the level of the North Aral from 38 meters to 42 meters, increasing the volume by 68% and reducing salinity by 50%. The construction also had a stepwise merit. It's not a mega-oceanic dike like the Fishla dike or the Sememdiaximal, but a relatively compact intervention, positioned in the right place and combined with basin operation. That's why it has become such a frequently cited case in water engineering. The impact didn't come from the sheer size of the project, but from the way it was fitted into the geography of the Old Sea and the Karidaria region. The dike changed the water circuit, and by changing the circuit, it changed the fate of the North Aral. The physical effects appear in a chain reaction. With more retention, the lake level rose with more volume. The salinity dropped with less salinity. Fish species returned, fishing came back, and with it income, boats, and economic activity. The World Bank records that the distance between Aralsk and the water dropped from about 75 kilometers to something around 20 kilometers, and that annual fish production has tripled. This helps explain why Kokaral is important from a constructive point of view. It shows that, in certain cases, the difference between consumption, collapse, and recovery. It's not about a gigantic project, but about the right project, implemented at the right hydraulic point and operated as part of a system. When you look only at the length of the Kokaral Dam, about 13 kilometers, it may seem relatively modest compared to some of the world's major coastal dikes. In the Netherlands, for example, the Afistilo dike is approximately 32 kilometers long, while in South Korea, the Sememdiaximal exceeds 32 kilometers. In other words, both are about 2.5 times larger than the Kokaral Dam. The most relevant aspect is not the physical size of the structure, it's the seismic impact. While many coastal dikes were built to protect cities or reclaim land from the sea, the Kokaral was designed to alter the water balance of an inland sea. By separating the North Aral from the South Aral, The dam completely changed the way the water from the Sir River is distributed within the former lake basin. Another piece of data that helps to measure the scale of the project refers to the investment. The construction of the dam and associated structures of the CNES project cost about $86.5 million, around 442 million Rs at the exchange rate when this documentary was completed. That amount would be enough to buy approximately 5,900 economy cars, each costing up to 75,000 Rs. But the impact of the project goes far beyond the initial investment. Today, the northern Aral has approximately 27 billion cubic meters of water. To give you an idea, an Olympic swimming pool holds about 2,500 cubic meters of water. This means that the lake stores the equivalent of about 10.8 million Olympic swimming pools, a gigantic volume that came back to exist thanks to a single engineering intervention. Positioned in the right place, the story of the Kokaral Dam is still evolving. Kazakhstan is currently working on the second phase of the recovery of the North Aral Sea. The plan is to increase the current volume of the lake, which is now around 23 to 27 cubic kilometers, to about 34 cubic kilometers. Over the next 4 to 5 years, this represents a gain of 11 cubic kilometers of water, or approximately 47.8% compared to the current volume. At the same time, the surface area should increase from about 3,065 square kilometers to 3,913 square kilometers, an increase of 842 square kilometers, the equivalent of 27.7% of the lake. Among the solutions being studied are raising the Kokaral Dam by up to 2 meters and building a new hydraulic complex. The goal is to raise the level of the North Aral to 40 meters, improving water retention and the regularity of the system. The economic impacts can be significant. More water means lower salinity, more consistent recovery of fishing, reactivation of port activities, and better environmental conditions in the delta of the CIR in the area. The Kokaral Dam sums up two sides of modern engineering. First, the ability to profoundly alter natural systems, as happened when the rivers that fed the Aral Sea were diverted. Then, the ability to correct part of that impact with carefully planned infrastructure. In fact, the 13-kilometer dam did not restore the original Aral Sea, but it showed that engineering can also help rebuild part of what seemed definitely lost. Thank you for watching this video until now. What do you think about this great engineering, about these impacts where infrastructure not only caused harm? Now, with observation, let's take a look at ours. Share your thoughts on this topic in the comments. If not, if you want another topic, let me know in the comments as well. I'll stop here, a big hug, and see you in the next video.